Good morning, and welcome to Temple Israel. And before we get started, I'd like to ask each and every one of you to find your cell phone. Take it out. Make sure it's on silent or it's off. But we would hate to have the phone ringing to interrupt our service this morning. So thank you. You heard a moment ago the beautiful melody, Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, played today by Beth on her clarinet, a very good friend of Laura's, one of the Maj ladies, and played in Laura's honor. It was one of her favorites. And in some ways, I think you'll agree, it captures her spirit. Her whole life was a hallelujah. And she was so life-affirming and so appreciative of all the good things, all the blessings, all of you, all of her good friends. And in our gathering today, I hope that we'll find some joy. I hope that we'll shed some tears, but also share some laughter as we celebrate Laura's life and bring forward as best we can her light and her essence.
Hamakom Yenachem Etchem. May our love embrace you. B'toch shahar avilet Zion, b'Yerushalayim. May her memory bring you peace, bring you strength, be a blessing. Hamakom Yenachem Etchem. May the Holy One comfort you. Hamakom Yenachem Etchem. May our love embrace you. Baruch atah b'vorecha, Baruch atah b'tzeitecha. B'toch shahar avilet Zion, b'Yerushalayim. May her memory bring us peace, bring us strength, and be a blessing. Hamakom Yenachem Etchem. May the Holy One comfort you. Hamakom Yenachem Etchem.
My name is Jason Gwazdoff. I'm the rabbi here at Temple Israel. And that beautiful voice was the voice of my wife, Lindy, who is our cantorial soloist and music director. And I can't start today without saying to all of you that we loved Laura. She was very much a part of this community, singing in the choir, attending services, having her bat mitzvah, folk dancing with Lindy several times a week. And she came to Israel with us in 2018, before the pandemic. And there we really got to see her in action. And we loved every minute as we loved her. Adonai ma'adam v'teda'ehu, ben enosh v'tachashvehu. Adonai, O God. It is beyond our grasp that our lives truly make a difference, that you or anyone should notice. For in the scope of this vast universe, we are like a passing single breath. Our days are like a shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed and in the evening fades and withers. At the end of our lives, it is ordained that we return to the earth, that we are at one with all creation. Our souls, however, our essence, continues on forever. If only we were wise, that we understood what happens when our days on earth have ended, then death would not be seen as a total ending. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our deeds on earth and all the love that we gave and shared does not disappear, but lives on through those we touched and treasured. These past few weeks since Laura's accident have been a nightmare. And we all waited to wake up and find that it was just a terrible dream. But we must face somehow the reality of this moment. The reality that we are here today as a gathering of mourners, to hold one another and to comfort one another and to pay tribute to a life that was taken far too soon. And it's not fair. And we will never know why. Those answers are beyond the limits of our mortal knowledge. But Jewish tradition encourages us not to ask in these matters the question, why? It instructs us instead to ask, in the words of Eicha, of Lamentations, how? Not why was Laura taken from us, but how? How will we make it through today and tomorrow and in the weeks and in the months ahead as we face her loss? And how will we find especially the appropriate and meaningful ways to give honor to her memory, to repay her kindness, to repay her love in the years that we have left by passing it on to others? These are the questions we need to ask today as we hold one another and as we find the words and the stories and all the good memories to celebrate Laura's life. Harold and Sandra and Michael and Bill, all of you, the whole family, we are here for Laura today, but we are also here for you. So please find strength and healing in this gathering. We pray that even in the depths of your sorrow, you will be lifted up and that you will find blessing. You know that that is what Laura would want for you. You know how much Laura loved you. And you know how much she loved being with you and sharing good food and good wine and good music in the company of good friends. So that's what we're going to do today. Maybe not the wine. That's what we're going to do as we give honor to her memory. There are just a few traditional prayers and readings that define a Jewish memorial service. Many of them are familiar to Christians as well, for they are part of a shared tradition. They give comfort and strength to our ancestors through the centuries and as they mourned the loss of loved ones. And they touch our souls as well. One of those readings comes from the Psalms. It's the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And it pictures God as a shepherd who guides us lovingly and guards us through life. But the most powerful image that I feel and see every time I read it comes in that line, "Though I pass through the valley of the shadows." Because anyone who's ever mourned the loss of someone special to us understands that dark place, that place of sadness that we find ourselves. But the wisdom of the psalm, as the rabbis interpret it, is that it's a place we pass through. It's a place we need to go to spend some time to feel the feelings, to feel the pain, which is a measure of the love we shared. But we don't stay there. We walk through there and ultimately go back to our lives and do our best to once again find joy. And that, of course, you know is what Laura would want for you. So I invite everyone, if you can, to join me in reciting, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. L'chol zman ve'et l'chol chafetz tachat hashamayim. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. Et laledet ve'et lamut. A time to be born and a time to die. Et lata'at ve'et la'kor natua. Boy, does that have extra poignancy today, thinking about Laura and Harold planting. Time to plant, and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. time to throw stones, and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Life is a succession of suns and seasons. It is time spent growing, grasping, and giving. It is warmth and wonder, cold and confusion. It is love. Life is love. Life is love lost. Life is heartache moderated by happiness. Life is all of this because life is an uncharted journey. Life is pain and life is passion. Life is loneliness and loveliness too. Life should be unending. What of the loves not lived, the labors left unfinished, the wishes only whispered, and the words still left unspoken? We, the living, are the loved. We, the living, are the dreams fulfilled. We are the promises of what is past and the fashioners of what is yet to come. Through us, the past lives on. Upon our deeds, our words, and our kindness rests the quality of the future. All these prayers we recite today, the El Malay Rachamim, the 23rd Psalm, the Mourner's Kaddish, these are for the living. They are our verbal response to the sadness surrounded by beauty, the gift of life and love. They remind us of a warm past, and they challenge us to perpetuate this warmth in the weeks and the months and the years to come, for ourselves and for the generations yet to come. I'm sure there are a million good Laura stories swirling around this room, and they're all in your memory bank and in your hearts. And I want to offer us a few quiet moments so that each of us might pray in our own way or meditate, but especially to spend a few quiet moments reaching back into our memories and bringing forward images of Laura as you knew her and as you remembered her, and think about how she touched your life. So let's take a few quiet moments.
with me in my heart, with me in my soul. Wherever I go, you're with me. With me through my dreams, although sometimes it might seem like I'm alone. You're with me, and all I have to do is think of you. There is no time, no place there's ever been an empty space. 'Cause you've been with me, you're the spark, the breath of life, the perfect part that fills me with strength and wisdom and peace. You're with me day and night, even when I question what I know is right. You're with me, and all I have to do is think of you. There is no time, no place there's ever been an empty space. 'Cause you've been with me, you're the spark, the breath of life, the perfect part that fills me with strength and wisdom and peace. You're with me day and night, even when I question what I know is right. When I lose sight and start to pray, and right away I know you're with me. You're with me.
You don't need to take any pictures or video because we're on YouTube right now and the service will be recorded and you can go back and watch it, share it with friends. There's a famous Jewish folk legend in the Talmud that gets retold several times throughout the centuries in rabbinic literature. It's the story about the Lamed Vavniks, the 36 righteous people in every generation for whom the world is allowed to exist. They are 36 humble, totally selfless people who quietly go about helping others, living a life of goodness and decency. In some retellings, these people don't even know who they are. They don't know they're Lamed Vavniks, or that the fate of the world rests on their shoulders. They just go about living their lives, quietly bestowing blessings upon every person they meet. And when they die, another one rises up and takes their place so that the world, with all its imperfections, might continue. I thought about that story the other day when I was thinking about how I could best capture Laura's character and Laura's essence, and how I could describe the way we all feel about her. I honestly don't know whether she was a Lamed Vavnik or not, or for us rational thinkers, whether such a thing even exists. But I do think you will all agree there was something about Laura, a lot of things about Laura, that reflect the virtues of a Lamed Vavnik. First of all, she was totally selfless in so many ways. constantly giving everyone she met unconditional love and acceptance. As a special education teacher working with the most challenging and needy students, as a beloved wife to her husband Harold, and as a devoted older sister to her siblings Sandra, Bill, and Michael, and as a dear, dear friend to so many people in all her networks. And there were many networks, people from all walks of life and all kinds of backgrounds, from all the things that Laura did. She was always giving of herself to others, and always with such generosity of spirit. As someone said, she always had a smile on her face and a song in her heart. Yep. Laura had an incredible zest for life. She loved life, and everything she did wholeheartedly, throwing herself into her many interests and activities with reckless abandon. I don't think there was anything she set her mind to that she couldn't do. And if something was hard or challenging for her, something for which she might not have natural ability or talent, she just worked harder at it. She had phenomenal inner strength and drive and determination. In her relationships, she was frank and straightforward with everyone. There was no gray area with Laura. She just said it like it is. But she never would deliberately say anything in a hurtful way. God forbid. She never said anything to cut someone down, only to build them up. As her husband Harold said, if Laura was your friend, you were the luckiest person in the world. Laura was born in Maryland, but moved to Tallahassee, Florida at a young age when her father took a teaching position at Florida State University as a professor of biology and endocrinology. Laura was the oldest, and as the firstborn, she bore the brunt of her parents' inexperience at parenting. As her brothers remembered, their parents were the novices of novices when it came to parenting, which meant in part that they put a lot of pressure on Laura to perform and to achieve. That came especially from their father, who was always in teaching mode. He saw her as another one of his students. That was not easy because his expectations as a college professor were quite high, and he could be very critical. That led in her brother's mind to Laura suffering some issues of low self-esteem. On the other hand, it did manage to instill in Laura a deep love of learning, something she never stopped doing her entire life. She loved to read, and she loved to write, and to learn, and to soak up everything there was to learn, from the practical to the esoteric. A good friend, Marianne, reminded me of how Laura, on our trip to Israel a few years ago, had not only her camera taking pictures wherever we went, but a tape recorder as well, recording everything she was hearing. She didn't want to miss a thing. Who does that? In her retirement, a time when others might just kick back and take it easy, Laura was constantly picking up new interests and setting new challenges for herself. In the past few years, for instance, she had her adult bat mitzvah right here at Temple Israel, standing right here, which required learning Hebrew and learning how to chant from the Torah, which is no easy task. There's a video on our temple YouTube channel of her chanting if you'd like to check it out. She does a darn good job. But when the bat mitzvah was over, Laura continued studying Hebrew, biblical Hebrew and conversational Hebrew, both at the temple and online. And I heard she recently started learning Arabic as well. She was always coming up to me asking for a translation of a Hebrew word or to explain the meaning of the root of a word, which I embarrassingly could not always provide. Here she comes again. Another question. In her office the other day, I spotted on a shelf a whole row of how-to books, including Calculus for Dummies, and Trigonometry for Dummies, and Algebra for Dummies, a whole row of books on math. I have no idea why she'd wanted to learn any of that. But there they were. From her mother, who was very creative and artistic, Laura received a love of the arts. She dabbled in painting and all forms of creative expression. That's something Laura did, especially in her retirement when she had more time on her hands. She made jewelry, she wove baskets, she made pottery with her own wheel and kiln, and was a master weaver working on her beautiful loom. Harold built her a whole house for all her crafts and arts and projects. You could hardly move around in there, there's so much. She loved to sew. There were a lot more creative endeavors, I'm sure, that I don't even know about. Her mother also encouraged music education, so Laura learned how to play the violin as a kid. Her brothers remembered humorously that the sound of screeching like fingernails on a chalkboard when she first got started, but she got better, and she became quite an accomplished musician. She also learned to play guitar and banjo, and she always loved to sing, which she did right here as a member of Kolot, our temple choir. None of us will ever forget the sound of her voice and the sheer pleasure on her face every time she sang. And we certainly will never forget Laura showing up at Zoom choir practice during COVID, playing her violin or joining us with her pet macaw Tucker perched on her shoulder. Not sure if the macaw was singing along or not. Another fond memory her brothers shared of her younger life was Laura performing a solo on stage at a high school talent show. She was playing her guitar and singing, as best they can remember, probably a song from Joan Baez. She particularly loved the folk music of that era. And speaking of Joan Baez, who I imagine was an important role model for Laura, both as a musician and a champion of social justice, her brothers remembered how Laura traveled to Washington, D.C. in 1965 to attend the huge rally in protest of the Vietnam War. It was the largest peace rally in American history, and she was not going to miss it. Laura had a deep passion for so many important causes back then and continuing throughout her life. And she was never afraid to tell you how she felt about certain issues or certain politicians who will go unnamed, for whom she had great disdain. That was probably the only time she ever spoke negatively or harshly about anyone. We're not going to name it. Laura's role as an advocate and protector and mentor for those in need also was something that Laura started at a young age. Sadly, her mother, despite all her creative talents and strengths, was not the most stable person and struggled with asthma and addiction. And her father was always busy throwing himself into his work. The family joke, which was as sad as it is humorous, is that he was always going back to the office, preparing a lecture, which left Laura, as the oldest of the four, in the position of caretaker, which she did without complaint. She did her very best to look after her siblings, to be the steady rock in their lives, even though they were not that far apart in age. She was so much more than just a big sister to them. And she was the glue that held the family together. Somewhere in all of that, while still in high school, Laura got a job tutoring disabled students. And it's no surprise that she discovered she was good at it and that she loved it. Here was something that both played to her strengths and talents and that filled her desire to make a difference in the world, helping others. From that experience, there was no denying and no question about what she was going to do professionally. She went to Florida State University, where her studies were very focused. She earned both bachelor's and master's degrees in special education. And upon graduation, started her teaching career in Appalachia, in one of the nation's poorest school districts, with some of the lowest achieving students. Remember that story about the Lamadvovniks and my suggestion that Laura just might be one? I rest my case. Laura understood that you don't just teach subjects, but that you teach students. And with special ed, the challenge was always finding and unlocking the way in which each student learned the best. With endless patience and deep empathy, Laura was a master at that. The next chapter of Laura's life begins with her first marriage to Bill Curtis, a man several years her senior, who was a boxer and a jazz musician. Laura was not too adept nor experienced in relationships. She was quite shy and somewhat introverted. In fact, so I suppose she was swept up in the attention he must have lavished on her. But this is how she made her way out to California. For her husband was playing and recording and doing gigs right here in Stockton at the Blackwater Cafe of blessed memory. A hangout of sorts for the jazz crowd. We don't know too much about the marriage other than that her husband, not long after coming to California, died of cancer. But this is how Laura got to Stockton, where she took a job teaching special education with the Stockton School District, another place that played perfectly to her strengths and talents. It was here as well where she met Harold, the man who became her second husband and the true love of her life. They couldn't be more different from one another in their backgrounds and in their personalities and in their dispositions, but they were, as they say, the yin to each other's yang, and they were true partners and lovers and best friends in the deepest sense of the meaning. Harold lived up in Washington State where he grew up, but was in Stockton visiting his sister while recovering from a serious injury to his hand that temporarily sidelined his work. As Harold described it to me, Laura, who was friends with his sister, showed up at her house, and he was totally awestruck from the moment he met her. She was the woman of his visions, who he swears he saw in a dream, even though he had sworn off woman was not looking for love. There was something about her that instantly drew him in. He said, I understood her right away. After that first meeting, Harold wrote Laura a letter in which he said he knew instantly he was going to marry her. Who does that? I'm not sure how Laura responded to that, but evidently she gave Harold the benefit of the doubt, and they started seeing each other on weekends. Harold said that he pursued Laura and that his stubbornness prevailed. Eventually, Harold moved down to Stockton, and he swore to Laura that he was a hard worker and he was going to prove it to her. They moved in together, and when Harold's hand healed, he did go back to work. 3 years into the relationship, they got married by a justice of the peace on the steps of the courthouse in Alpine County. It's a beautiful picture. Harold showed me of that. Harold told Laura, you can either have a big wedding or I'll buy you a house. And obviously, being the practical woman she was, she chose the latter. She chose the house. Which brings us to the story of the house, the country home where Harold and Laura lived together for the last 30 plus years. Laura did own her own house in Stockton, but Harold, and eventually Laura, had a different plan for how they wanted to live. Harold didn't like the hustle and bustle and the noise of the city, and he yearned to live in the country where it was quiet and where he could plant and grow his own food. And he said to Laura, I'm not going to buy you flowers. I'm going to grow you flowers. On a rainy day drive through the country in the outskirts of Stockton, they spotted the perfect home on the perfect property. When it went on the market a few months later, Harold offered to buy it on the spot, giving the previous owner a generous down payment. I imagine many of you here have been out to the property or have heard about it from Laura or Harold. Just as many of you have no doubt been the happy recipients of all the wonderful produce they grew, much more than they could ever consume themselves. Raise your hand if you've ever been to the house or ever eaten from there. Mm-hmm. I thought so. With hard work and lots of love for that task, they grew fruits and vegetables and planted the seeds of a wonderful life they shared together. A miracle every day. Laura, mind you, did not grow up in this environment. She was more of a city girl through and through, but she grew to love the experience. And she learned so much about horticulture and farming. And Laura grew to love the tranquility of the land. When they weren't working or tending the orchard, she liked nothing better than to sit on the porch with Harold, entertaining friends, or just spending time, the two of them alone, talking and watching the birds. It was truly a beautiful, meaningful life. In the last few years, while we all suffered from the COVID lockdowns, Laura was also suffering from a few physical issues. She had cataract surgery and a hip replacement. And the surgery and the long recovery sadly kept her from doing so many of the things she loved, like Israeli folk dancing and participating in temple services and activities and choir and playing maj with her maj buddies, an important, dear group of very close friends, and working in the garden. She was just getting better and standing taller when the terrible accident that took her life happened. If there's any consolation at all, it's that Laura left nothing unsaid. That the people she loved and the people who loved her knew fully the joys of her presence in their lives. We just wanted more. Harold will always be able to hold dear his last encounter with Laura, dancing slowly together before she left the house, professing their deep love for one another, as they always did. And one last thing, one last golden nugget which I need to share this morning are the last words that Laura wrote in the journal she kept, where she wrote down all her thoughts and inspirations. She wrote it the day before the accident, almost like a premonition that something was going to happen, that she needed to leave behind a message of consolation that might give comfort and strength to her loved ones. It's quite powerful and beautiful, and it speaks to all of us today. Here's what she wrote. Our loved ones leave behind spaces in the words that can never be filled. But they also leave behind love and light in each of us, sparks of joy and hope that live in our hearts and give strength to our souls. Rest in peace, Laura. And know that your light and your love will forever indeed be in our hearts. That it will bring sparks of joy and hope and strength when we think about your special light and the many blessings that you brought into our lives. We will never forget you and the incredible role model you were of righteous living and goodness and love. May your memory forever be a blessing. We know it will be. Amen. We have a few more prayers that we're going to sing and recite to conclude our service. And then we're going to go behind that wall into the social hall and have what we call a meal of consolation so that we can spend more time together to embrace one another and to share good memories and to eat. Whenever Jews get together, that's what we do. I hear that happens in other faiths as well. And if you can stay, we're going to come after an hour or so when we see that we've all finished eating. If you can stay, if you'd like, we're going to come back into the sanctuary and have what we call a Shiva Minyan. It's a brief service, a few prayers of the liturgy, and at that time we will have open mic and invite anyone who would like to share a good story or a memory to do so. And we invite you all to stay and share that time with us. We rise now either physically or in spirit.
El male rachamim shochen baramim amsei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina kedoshim utorim kezohar harakia mazirim et nishmat liora shoshana bat magen vegibora shehacha leolama bal harachamim yastereha b'setek kenafav leolamim v'yitzror hachayim et nishmata Adonai hu nachlata v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Laura, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yamad yivrach cherutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'zman kariv v'yimru Amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mivarach le'olam ulomei omaya, Yitparach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yithaleh v'yitalal shemeda kudisha barichu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran v'yalma v'imru Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, huya osei shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. May God's name be sanctified and praised. May God's design for this world and for all people lead us to justice and good. May God, who has decreed that all who live must die, teach us to accept death, yet with all our hearts desire life. May God, whose plan for us is sometimes hidden, Reveal the way to become stronger when we face the trials of life. And may God, Oseh HaShalom, creator of peace, be for us a source of comfort and strength and peace. And together we say, Amen. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember her. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember her. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember her. So long as we live, Laura too shall live, for she is now a part of us as we remember her. Lech ki shalachacha Adonai. Go your way, for God has called you. Lech v'Adonai hiyeh imach. Go your way, and may God be with you. V'halach lefanecha tzidkecha. Kvod Adonai yasvecha. May your righteousness go before you, and may the glory of God receive you. Let all who are gathered here please recite these words after me, speaking them to Laura's family. May God console you, with all who mourn, in Zion and Jerusalem. Hamakom yinachem etchem batok sha'ar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. Now go forth in peace to life. I'm sure I speak for the family when I say thank you to everyone for coming here today to support them and to be a part of this celebration of life. And we invite you now to join us in the social hall for the meal of consolation, and if you can, to stay, and we'll announce it when it's time to come back into the sanctuary. This concludes our service.